in this. There we go. So bear with us. Hopefully we'll get through as much as possible. If anybody wants to ask questions at any time, just let me know. There is a Q&A button down the bottom of Zoom, and you're able to ask questions in there. You can also upvote other people's questions. And if anybody wants to send us a message, we are also at hello@abetterwork.com as well. So we're here to talk about hybrid hurdles and navigating the pitfalls of hybrid work. So, you know, look, 2 weeks before the pandemic, I did a talk on the world of work and how it was changing, and how employees' needs and wants had changed dramatically, and that as business owners, as leaders, we had to change how we work to accommodate for this change in the environment. And 2 weeks later, the greatest work experiment of all time, unbeknownst to me, was about to start. So for many, that was chaotic. You know, we had kids at home being homeschooled out of school. We had multiple people working in environments. There's people in house shares who didn't have desk space. IKEA sold out of desks, all the rest of it. It was chaotic. And then you also had the opposite side, where actually it was too quiet, too lonely, too isolating. And so that great experiment, while it forced us and was a great catalyst to work from home and experiment with that and see what worked, it wasn't the ideal situation. We have the opportunity now to address that, to carefully, intentionally, and thoughtfully change how we work intentionally, so that we can meet the needs of employees, but also that we can create sustainable, thriving businesses on top of that as well. So what is hybrid? And when we talk about hybrid, and I think when we started in hybrid 3 years ago now, or this great experiment 3 years ago, hybrid, remote, digital first, all of these phrases have been used over the last few years. So basically, hybrid is where there's a mix of online and in person. Fully remote is where we are entirely remote and online. Office-based, obviously the more kind of traditional setup within the four walls. We all go in 9 to 5 or whatever the hours are. Digital first. This is kind of a new phrase. And that's where we prioritize the use of digital tools and technologies to enable employees to work from anywhere at any time. Okay. And then flexible work is not just how we work, whether it's, in the office or home, but also when we work as well. And none of these work in isolation, but it's just these different terms that are bandied about. For the purpose of this, really, we're going to be talking more about really digital first environments. That's kind of my preference. If we were to look at my team and my business, we're a digital first, flexible team, really. That doesn't mean that it's a free for all. It doesn't mean we can rock up whenever we want and do a bit of work and go home. It's more, we've got really clear expectations when we need to be online, when we need to be responsive, when we meet up in person. And then outside of that, it's about getting the outcomes that we need as a business. So in the media, there's been so many different headlines, so much to navigate around. And it's almost becoming more and more contentious, as maybe a lot of media is these days. But when we look at leaders are more likely to want to return to the office environment. Women, ethnic minorities, those living with disabilities are more likely to want to work in a remote or a hybrid environment. Ireland has the highest level of adoption of hybrid working, and actually for open job posts, Ireland also proportionately has the highest number of open hybrid and remote posts. So people are doing it, people are adopting, companies are adopting. And if you're not doing it, somebody else is. And they're going to be the honeypot for talent, potentially for the better talent and the best talent, by offering that, because we know that that's where many employees want to go. Now, there's lots of pros and cons. but it's not all fun and games. I'm a huge advocate of hybrid, and have been obviously long before 2020. But there are pitfalls, and even I have to recognize that. And we're going to deal with some of those. So the three kind of pitfalls that we're going to deal with today is that managers are really struggling with the skill set to manage and trust employees. There's less spontaneous networking opportunities. So those kind of water cool moments. How do we actually connect? How do we build relationships? How do we build network online? We're going to touch on that just a little bit, quite lightly. And then we're going to talk about culture dilution. This is another thing that we're hearing a lot of people talk about. If we're outside these four walls within which we work, well, then how do we create a very cohesive culture where everyone is really clear what the culture is, what the behaviors that we expect from each other? So we're going to touch on those, all of those today, as much as we can, at least. Now, just a little bit about me before we go on. So for 15 years or so, I was kind of perched on the corporate ladder. That's, you know, I have a kind of corporate leadership background in incredible cultures and environments, and in some that weren't so great also. And I suppose when I started my kind of hybrid and remote, I remember about 15 years ago, probably even more, and looking for a day or two to work from home, and people kind of going, what are you talking about? We don't do that sort of thing. And it was in that environment where, you know, you'd be on a conference call, and there'd be a conference system in the meeting room, and you wouldn't be able to hear the people around the table, and all you'd hear is paper shuffling in the microphone. It was just, it was a nightmare. But still, the benefits for me at the time, and clearly for the businesses too, paid off. So I've just been such a great advocate for so long. And about 6 years ago, I suppose, for me, I wanted to go out on my own. And one of the key drivers for that was, how can I create a work environment where people can thrive regardless? I wanted to reinvent, I suppose, how we work, so that we could leverage the ambition and the talent and the skills that are out there in the workforce, or not in the workforce, because they were being missed. Because in a traditional environment, it's not always set up for all types of employees. And so A Better Work was born. And now we actually help other companies create ways of working, hybrid work, remote work, management skills, leadership, effective leadership, on how to actually create environments where people can thrive, how to create teams that are really effective, that are pulling in the right direction. And all of this is, I suppose, based on scientific research, based data and insights. I'm also a certified Gallup strengths coach, and that comes into a lot of my work. And, you know, every project or every company that we work with will know, you know, that benefit of working with strengths, and how the brain opens up and gets more innovative and creative when we start to look at what's brilliant. And that's where the Gallup strengths coaching comes into it. Now, before we move on as well, we have a little announcement today, which is very, very, very exciting. We have this new, which actually just arrived this morning. I'm so excited. We are launching Hybrid But Better, a practical guide to managing and leading in a hybrid workplace. This is just amazing. We're very excited. This is basically an A to Z of how to approach hybrid working. Because there is no one size fits all. We can't say, oh, this works for A Better Work, or this works for this company, and this works for this company, therefore we're just going to do that. You've got to find what's right for you. What are the jobs? Who are the people? What's right for you? And this workbook gives you those tools. It sets the scene and allows you to create what is right for you and your business. And it is suitable for business leaders, business owners, and managers of any type. And it is very, or even HR people who are looking at this. And it doesn't mean that we're going to start looking at hybrid from scratch. It's looking at, okay, what's working, what's not, and what do we do about it? We've got a digital download version, which is amazing because it's all editable. So you can do it all on screen, or there's a physical version as well. So if you go to the chat right now, you'll see the link to go and get a pre-sale price on that right now. So we're launching it officially next week, but as of today, the pre-sale has opened. So anybody who gets it will get it for a kind of one-off, never to be repeated discount that we're offering until the 25th. Now, when we look at the hybrid business case, let's go back into this. And there's so much research out there now, which is incredible. We've got so many opportunities to find data. And what we see is that 92% of employees are favouring hybrid or remote working. Companies are saving up to €10,000 per employee per year. And employees on top of that can save up to €6,000 per year. So there's potentially huge benefits around this from a financial perspective as well. 68% of employees prefer a hybrid environment. So then 34 on top of that prefer a fully remote environment, and that's where we get the 92%. This is key for me. The cat is out of the bag. 50% of employees would rather resign than go back to work, or go back to office full-time, not back to work. We're all working full-time. But go back to the office full time. I was talking to a senior executive yesterday who had taken a very, very senior role in an organization and hadn't, really checked the hybrid or remote policy in the organization. And it turns out that there is none. It's fully in office. And, that person now is actually looking to change his working environment, because that's just not something he's going to compromise on regardless. And that we're hearing that so much more. If you're not leveraging this, other companies are. 6%, so there's up to 6% employee productivity is up. Employee productivity is up by 6%, but actually, depending on where you read this, it's anywhere up to 22%. So this is the kind of conservative view in terms of productivity. And then finally, which is very close to my heart, is 49% of managers are struggling to trust employees that they are doing their best work. And this is part of why we're doing this. This is part of my motivation around this, because I believe so much that we can leverage as business owners, as leaders, as managers. We can leverage the workforce so much better, create a much better environment for people to work in, to be more productive, to be more innovative and creative. But we've got to find and scale up our managers and our leaders to lead in those environments. It's not within the four walls, and we're going to go through that a little bit here today. So some of the steps, I guess, when you want to look at hybrid, there's a few steps to take. Now, obviously, we're going to look at those three particular areas around culture, around managing, and around that idea of network. But for any plan, I just want you to go back a little bit and think, do the deep dive. You may have assumptions of what people want or what they need, but get the data and from that find the insights. Do a deep dive, surveys, one-to-ones, whatever it is, really listen, get the perspectives and multiple perspectives, because everyone in the organization, even if they're doing the same job, they're going to be at different stages of their career. They're going to be at different stages of their life, and they're going to have different needs. So do that deep dive, really listen and try and put away your biases and really openly listen to what you're hearing. Create those personas. So you may have a new starter who's going to have very, very different needs to somebody towards the end of their career or in the mid of their career. So again, look at those different types of needs, try and collect them and create these personas, these kinds of employees and the kinds of needs that they might need. helping you to design a better environment for everybody that will suit those different needs and wants as people move through their career or their stage in the company with you. Objectives, what are you actually trying to achieve here? Write it down and be really clear about it. And that might be just a point in time, that might change, but for now, where are you prioritizing? What are you working on to help keep you really focused? The thing is with hybrid, there's so much involved in it. There's so many parts, there's so many pieces. And when I went to write this workbook, this started out as kind of a 10-pager. It's now 60, 70 odd pages, because there's so much to it. So try and keep it really focused. What is it that you're trying to do? And go from there and spread out. Plan, create a careful plan. And what I would say with this is still an experiment. It will take years before we really figure out what's working and what's not working. Some companies are nailing it. Most companies are not. So take this as experiments. Create small experiments. Figure out what's working, what's not working, iterate, and ensure that we're feeding back constantly. So this should be a constant loop of experiments and feedback. And anything that you're planning within this should kind of have that mindset to it as well. It doesn't have to be permanent. See what's working, iterate, feedback. And then finally, implement. When you've experimented, when you've iterated, when you find something that is going to work for a wider group, then you can roll it out to a wider group at that point. If you want to take just a screenshot of this health check, this is absolutely not a deep dive, but what is sometimes helpful is to articulate a little bit our hypothesis. What is it we're trying to prove here? What is it we think is working? What is it we don't think that's working? And this hybrid health check is a great little way to just kind of think, right, actually our communication, we're hearing again and again that it is not working. We need to transform it. Our management skills, we know we have never provided any support or training for our managers to manage in hybrid. That needs to be transformed. Trust, actually, we've got a really good basis of trust. We trust your employees. We've worked in a hybrid and remote environment for a few years. Actually, we want to maintain that, maybe improve a little bit, maybe maintain. Feedback saying, so just going through that and doing a little bit of a health check to know where you prioritize and start your efforts first, because you can't approach everything in one go. So now when we look at culture, how do we create a cohesive culture? And what the hell is culture anyway? This Maya Angelou quote, I know it's used for so many things, but for me, when I think about culture and what culture and organizational culture is, I think it's so apt. It is about how we feel. It's about how we treat each other. It's about how we behave. It's about the guardrails around that. When you think of any, previous work experience that you had, and you think of an incredible culture, there is a feeling, there is an emotive feeling attached to that. We're attached. We have a sense of belonging with that culture. We have a sense of identity with that culture. When you think of a culture maybe that wasn't so great, or maybe even a little bit toxic, again, that makes us feel a certain way. We have an emotive response to that. So culture is all about how we feel and how we behave. And sometimes it's seen as intangible, because it's what we do when the boss isn't around. It's how we treat each other. But it's what we stand for, and it's our non-negotiables. So it's so important that we actually take the time to define it. And when we're not working within the four walls that the culture is traditionally created, or we would have seen it as traditionally created, then it starts to become something a little overwhelming when we think, how do we focus and create the right culture and not have this idea of culture dilution? What I would say is that culture can't be left to chance. It couldn't before, right? In the office, it couldn't. But I think we're just more aware of this idea of culture dilution when we're working remotely and in hybrid. So we have to be more intentional about it. And what I would say as well is that while culture was often created by accident in the office environment, it often wasn't worth the wall that it was written on. So you often see that trust, excellence, integrity, What I would say is, when you're looking at what you really stand for, what is really important to you, go really deep, go unique. What's unique to you? So we'll go into that just a little bit now. Your culture is uniquely yours. It is, an organization is a complex environment. It's not a one in, one out. It's a one in, and then we've got all these humans doing things and behaving in certain ways. And, you know, we never know what's going to come out the other side. That's the culture, that middle bit, how we work, how we behave, how we interact. That's all part of the culture. So identify what part of that is uniquely yours, and try and make sure that when you do get to define your culture, and we'll go into that a little bit of how to define the culture, but when you get into that, try and make sure that whatever your culture is defined as is not the same as the company down the road, because this is the part that defines you as an organization. It's your personality, and it is unique. It's the one part. Everything else in your company can be copied, but the fact is that your culture is as unique as the people within it. So leverage that, because it is your competitive advantage. When we look at a cohesive culture, how do we do that? So first, define it. If you think about that kind of idea of listening, do that deep dive. As a leader, absolutely, there is this kind of top-down approach to culture. You know, if you've got a leader who is very command and control, that's going to have an impact on the people around the organization. If you've got a leader who is defaults to trust, that's going to have an impact on the people around the organization. Of course it will. But at the same time, there's lots and lots of the culture that's happening when the leader is not around, or when the boss is not around, and finding ways to listen to that, allow it to percolate, and then help to articulate it. For any business leaders or owners on here, think of it at an organization level. What is our purpose? What are we actually working towards? What is our vision? What are our values? Values is my preferred way to say it. I think more in organization, guiding principles. So what are the ways that we behave? What are our non-negotiables? And I really like these ones that I found here. There's not a lot of companies that are going to have this wording: cultivate family, boldly embrace change, be honorable, value craftsmanship, work hard, play hard, leave everyone in awe. That's unique. That's different to trust, integrity, customer ownership, whatever it is. The second thing is, on managers, let's just go there, because I know that this is a key topic for managers. And while you may not have input and influence to define the culture at an organizational level, you do have your team level, and look at what is the culture within your team, and what are the team level agreements that you can create, so that at least your team has this kind of cohesive guardrails within which they can work, so that they can collaborate, so that they can get on together, so that they can reduce tension, and basically they can work better together. The second thing around a cohesive culture is live it. So you can stick whatever you want on the walls. The minute, in particular, leadership is not living those values, not holding people accountable to those values, not having the supporting systems, aligned with those values, then those values written on the wall are doing more harm than good, because it means people will not trust you. People will not trust what you say. So if you're going to do this, you've got to make sure that it's going to be lived. The way I'd see it is, you've got these, when I say supporting systems, it doesn't mean, the IT systems. It's more about how do we reward people. So we've seen it in multiple organizations where we say we believe in trust and integrity and treating people with respect. And then the person who goes off and reaches these huge targets, but treats everybody else terribly, gets the bonuses, gets the rewards, is treated like royalty. So respect, therefore, is not one of our core non-negotiable values. It's just a nice to have if you're not reaching your targets, right? That's not what culture is. Or well, it is what culture is, but it's what absolutely dilutes culture and turns it into something that we really don't want, because culture can work with you or against you. So think about that. Think about how we meet, our rituals, you know, the decisions that we make, how we make decisions. All of that is part of your guiding principles or your values, and being really clear about that and making it really clear to everyone, bringing it in constantly is so important. I find with my team, probably on a weekly basis, in our communications, we're talking about our guiding principles in one way or another. We're talking about, oh, that's part of our find a way. Well done, you did it, you found a way. When we thought it was all impossible, you did it. You know, we're bringing in, oh, no bull ever. Okay, yeah, I know this was a really hard conversation to have, but like, we need to have this conversation now. That's what it's about. It's about bringing it in constantly into your conversations, into your decision making, into your systems. And then finally, custodians of culture. Culture will change and evolve over time. So it's so important that you see yourself not as an owner or a controller of culture. You're a custodian of the culture. And so what you need to constantly do is listen, refine, you know, if needed, adjust, and then reinforce and ensure that, you know, that what you have defined is being lived. If it's not, where is the difference? Why is there a difference? Does it mean that how we articulate it needs to change? Or does it mean that there's something, you know, wrong with how we're supporting that culture and how we're reinforcing it? Okay. So now we're going to move on a little bit to managing and leading in a hybrid environment. And there's 3 areas that I'm going to deal with. That's communication. It's so important on every level to communicate, which is why it's written 3 times. We're going to talk about leading with strengths, and we're going to talk about clear expectations. So communicate, again, the number one communication skill for any leader is to listen. I would say be curious, ask questions, like, you know, think like a journalist. What can you find out from these people? How can you actively listen? So this, you know, we often think we're listening, but when somebody is speaking, we are triggered. Our next kind of thought and what we're going to say is triggered. And so we basically switch off until we get a break in the conversation and we're not actively listening. Sit back, actively listen. If I would say, as a facilitator, one of the key tools of a facilitator is to allow the silence, you know, count to 5 before you speak, allow that silence, you know, give that opportunity for others to speak, because as leaders, it's very hard for anybody to speak up to you. So just be really conscious of that. More than ever in a hybrid environment, employees, managers, everyone can feel isolated. So again, how are we going to work with this? This is this idea of connection and network. One of the, I suppose, the pieces that a lot of people will quote as what's missing in a hybrid or remote environment. So you might have 10 meetings a day. You might feel all talked out. You might feel Zoom fatigue or meetings fatigue or Teams fatigue or whatever. But other people might actually feel wholly and utterly isolated because they may have 0 meetings in their day. Being really conscious of that, actively listen. It's not just your perspective. Think of the perspectives of the others around you. And one of those kind of ways to create meaningful connection is mastering one-to-ones. So move away from the day-to-day. So if this is with a direct report or even peers, move away from the day-to-day. If you're going to have a project-based meeting or a task-based meeting, fine, be really clear about that. But one-to-ones are something totally different. They're about how to excite, how to motivate, how to coach, how to show people, you know, or help people prioritize, how to appreciate, give feedback, all of these things. You find what's right for you and your teams in terms of one-to-ones, in terms of cadence. Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Is it bi-weekly? figure that out, but make sure they come out of the day-to-day. As business owners, business leaders, we're often told how important it is to get that time out of the business, to look, from afar, to get the eagle view. But actually, everybody needs to do that. And it's your job on the one-to-one to ensure that you're helping employees to sit back, to take this eagle eye view on their work, and to, and not just their work, but their career, their motivation, what they enjoy doing, what they don't like doing. And actually, in the workbook, we do have some pages of questions that you can actually ask over time to ensure that you're not getting stuck into that day-to-day level one-to-one meeting. In terms of meaningful meetings, then there's also, sit down and think this through. What are the meetings that you want to have, particularly in a hybrid environment? So how often do we want to meet in person? What do we want to do in those meetings? How often do we want to meet online? What are the purpose of those meetings? So we are very good at meeting to do project updates. We're very good at doing project kickoffs. What we're not brilliant at doing often is unsticking. How do we unstick and ensure that we're moving forward? How do we ensure that we're focused and prioritizing in the right way? How do we actually spend time on team development, learning, building the culture within our team, building the culture within our organization? How do we set time aside to network? How do we decide how we make decisions? All of that, sit down and plan out what are the kinds of meetings or the kinds of ways we get together. Nearly don't even call it meeting, but what are the ways that we get together, and what's important? What are the needs that we're fulfilling through that? And then plan the kinds of meetings around that. And think this through. I think I remember one time, years and years and years ago, and look, I was early in my career. In my defense, I was early in my career in a leadership role. And I remember being in a meeting, and there was 15 kind of, different leaders from different parts of the business. And I can't remember what the meeting was about, but I know that there was so many people kind of, checking their emails on their, I think it was probably a BlackBerry at that time, like checking their emails. And this was it was at least an afternoon, if not longer. And I remember going, oh my gosh, how much does this meeting actually cost? This one meeting with these 15 people, most of the people, 80% of the people in this room are completely disengaged. They're not listening, they don't care, and they've got more important things to do, certainly in their mind anyway. And I started to add up the cost, and it was over €10,000 for this meeting. And it just blew my mind. Let's make that count. I'm not saying we don't have a 10 grand meeting. Maybe we do. Maybe that's a great use of our time. But if you think of it in those terms, you're going to make sure that that meeting counts. These meetings where we invite people, and then, I'll invite somebody because they're relevant for the next iteration of the meeting, the next round of that meeting. And then they stay on the invite for eternity, even though they were really only needed for that one meeting. We need to stop that. When we are valuing our people's time as much as any other resource in the organization, that's when we're going to get real effectiveness. That's when we're going to get real engagement. That's when people aren't going to feel stressed because they're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, that they're sitting there just wondering when they're going to get the actual work done. Anyway, enough of that. I digress. There is a meeting planner in the workbook, but even just take a look at this. Think about, what is the actual purpose? What are we trying to get out of there? Who are we going to have the meeting with? And why should they be there? Like, what's their purpose? How often is it going to be? When is it going to be? And what is the meeting cost? Because when you start to look at that, maybe per meeting or over a year, that starts to put a new lens. Well, do we really need everyone online just to kind of check the status of a project that's already on Teams or Slack or whatever? Actually, we could use that time a lot more productively by unpicking some problems or having something, like finding some innovation. And then what's the structure? How are we going to make sure that all of the voices, and this goes into the next one, this inclusion, this power of voice and share of voice, how are we going to make sure that people get the opportunity to speak on this call? And it's not just the leader or the manager. I often hear from managers that I work with that they're trying to get people to speak, but nothing's coming back. So how are you going to make the space? How, as a leader, can you ensure that people will speak up? One of the greatest tools is a check-in question, a simple check-in question. And it can be anything. We had a great check-in question this week. Thanks, Tanya, I think came up with it. You know, if you were to go back 24 hours, what advice would you give yourself? It was super. You know, what superhero trait would you like? Whatever it is, what's your favorite coffee order? Like, it doesn't have to be some groundbreaking, meaningful question. It's a quick check-in. And what happens is, at the start of a call or a meeting, when people are given the opportunity to speak up, they are far more likely to speak up later in the call because they understand that their voices are valued. So consider that at the very least as part of your meetings, and also consider, as a leader, as a business owner, by your power, by the fact that you are responsible really for the mortgage payments of the people in the room, right? Because that is effectively, you can hire and fire these people, so you're effectively, that's what's happening. Then how much harder is it for somebody to speak up in front of you? And just be really conscious of that. Like, you'll get some people who will just won't care, and you've created a really psychologically safe environment, but maybe less experienced people, more introverted people, just may take a little bit more encouragement in creating space and allowing them to speak up and input. And by the way, unless they're speaking up and inputting, you know, so much of the brain power in the organization for which you are paying them is going to waste. And then finally, what I would say is, as a leader, as a manager, master facilitation. Meetings should very, very rarely be something that's just a broadcast, right? There are times when that is right, but that should probably be 3% of the overall meetings. Like, it should be a very, very small percent. So how can you become and master your facilitation skills to ensure that there is more input, there's more involvement, people feel safe to speak up? Lots and lots of things. There's loads of tools. And actually, what I would encourage you to do is, we do a weekly tweak. It's a twerk because it's a tweak to your work. We do a weekly twerk, and there are tips and tools constantly to, you know, help this kind of idea of facilitation and share a voice, and how to get participation improved in your teams and organizations. Okay. So on that, we're going to move on to lead with strengths. And as I just said, I'm a Gallup Strengths coach. I'm a huge fan of strengths. And whether it is, you know, the something that's very defined, what we do know, and Gallup are one of the largest research houses in the world, they are looking at thousands of data points. So people who know and use their strengths on a daily basis are 6 times more likely to be engaged at work. When we think that, you know, such a small percentage of people are actually truly engaged in their work, that's phenomenal. 3 times, they're 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life, and they're 7.8% more productive. And teams and organizations that receive strengths-based development can have a 29% higher profit, 19% increased sales, and 72% lower employee turnover. And just yesterday I saw, or the day before maybe, I saw something from Simon Sinek about burnout, and the using strengths can also help to alleviate burnout, which is absolutely, you know, rampant in today's workforce. So strengths isn't something that's just kind of nice and fluffy and nice to have. Strengths is essential for the profitability and the performance of your business and your teams. So how can you do that? 1, Seek out moments of brilliance, identify them, clarify them, articulate them, and feed them back. Why were they moments of brilliance? What did you see in a person that made that so brilliant? What was the effect on the team? What was the effect on the project? What was the effect on the company? Whatever it was, feed back those moments of brilliance. Guide reflection on strengths. So part of that one-to-one, you know, how are you bringing your strengths? Do you feel like you're working in your strengths on a daily basis? What is it you love to do? When have you performed really well? So ask all of those lovely generative questions for people to reflect on their own strengths, how they're using them, how they're working on them, and potentially how they can increase them even more in the future. Seek input from others. So, you know, when you know something has gone well, or a project has worked really well, or a relationship has turned really well, or a relationship has turned around and two people who potentially had some tension in the past have started working well really together, start to look at that, right? Identify it, forensically analyze it. What is it? What is it that's happened here? And feed that back and show them the impact of them working in their strengths. Use the Gallup Strengths Finder. It is a super assessment that you can do. It's about, I think it's about 60, 70 euro to do a kind of standard assessment. And it is a very, very, very powerful guide. Of course, we can help you with all of that. And we also help to work with teams on Gallup strengths. And we do team, team effectiveness. It's called a Great Team Program around strengths, where we work with the manager, we work with the team, we work with individuals to ensure that the team are having the right conversations so that they can work really, really well together, that it helps to ease tensions, that they're pulling in the same direction, all of these great things. Then connect strengths to goals. So when you're looking at your goals and they're kind of these pie in the sky, how are you going to use your specific strengths and your skills to achieve these goals? That internalizes it a lot more and makes it a lot more real for people. They start to see and visualize how they're going to achieve those goals, which makes them far more likely to actually achieve it in the end. And then create a strengths-based culture. Build that into every step of the employee life cycle, you know, from onboarding to offboarding and every stage in between as well. Now, the final piece that we're going to touch on here today, because I'm really conscious that we're going to run out of time very shortly, but how can we create really clear expectations? So I spoke about my team, that we work fully remotely, fully flexibly, but we have very, very clear expectations. There are particular calls that everybody has to be on. There are particular times in the day when we are all responsive, and we know that at times in a remote environment, if the guardrails and expectations aren't set up clearly, then it's like working in different time zones. So, you know, some people say, well, I prefer to work in the evening and I prefer to work in the morning. Then you're a day going in between. So how do you set up the right guardrails for your organization, your teams, so that you can work seamlessly, highly productively, but within these very, very clear expectations? This also helps with managers to understand how to trust, how to have the conversations and feedback when standards aren't met or when expectations aren't met. Really, really clearly, you know, spend some time on this, get into the roots of this. And this is a great topic as well for one-to-ones. So what are the roles? You know, so many people we speak to actually don't have clear roles. And it doesn't have to be like a kind of job description. It can be very loose. What is your role within the organization? What is it you're actually doing here? You know, and expand out that a little bit. And it doesn't have to be for 100%. I love the approach of define 60% of your role and let's see what we can do with the other 40%, because we can create exciting things when it's not all defined. What are your goals? What is it you're working towards? And how are we going to measure all of that? Meaningful measurements, not pages and pages of reports, you know, that take so long to put together. What are the meaningful steering metrics or measurements so that we know that we're working towards the right thing and that we've got the right outputs and outcomes to achieve our business goals? What are your core hours? So when are we all expected to be online? Are we all expected to be online? Do we need to? Maybe some people do, maybe some people don't. Figure all of that out and what's right for the team based on what it is that you have to do. What are your flex? like, where is the flex? Can they work from home? Can they work, remotely, in the office? When do they have to work? All of that kind of stuff. Define it. What are the priorities? What are the really important things? Is it, that we get every project absolutely perfect before we launch? Or is it that we get a project good enough to have a minimum viable product so that we can test it and iterate it? They're two perfectly good things, but which one do we prioritize? What's more important to us? And prioritize, being really, really clear with priorities for flexible and remote working is so key, so that there is no room for confusion in that. And then behaviors. What are the behaviors we expect? Going back to those kind of values and guiding principles, what are the behaviors that we accept, the norms that we accept, and what is it that we don't accept at all? And feedback. How do we feedback? How do we like feedback? All of this good stuff as well. Being really clear. Take time with your team, one-to-one, to start articulating and writing this down. And again, you'll see there's a team agreement. It's part of the workbook, but take a look at there. All of those kind of headings are great for a team agreement. Just start writing it down. So, to sum up a little bit of what we've covered this idea of creating a compelling culture, and being intentional about that. Don't leave it to chance. The importance of communication. And actually, one thing I don't think I said, you cannot over communicate. So yes, you can have too many meetings, right? But when you're working in a remote and hybrid environment, I don't want you to think, oh my God, I've already said that. I've already said thank you, or I've already said this. Think of it as reinforcement, not repetition. You've already said it, yes, but you don't know how much has been absorbed. Say it again, say it again. When people start to say you already said that, that's the time to stop. But I could almost guarantee that will never happen. Lead with strengths, find those moments of brilliance, feed them back. You will be astounded at the effect that can have on a team or an individual when you start to lead with strengths, when you start to focus on where we're brilliant rather than these are the weaknesses, these are the threats, these are the bad things. Because what happens is our minds shut down. It's like a sucker punch to the gut, and it's really hard to be innovative and creative when you're feeling that kind of fight or flight response. And then clarify expectations across a whole ream of things, from goals to core hours, to boundaries, to what our team purpose is, all of that. Clarify your expectations. And of course, please do go onto our website and have a look at our workbook. As I said, we do have a physical version, which I'm very excited to hold and have in my hands. And also we're going to have an online version as well. So give me 1 second. I'm going to have a quick look at these. Wait, I think I'm going to have to stop sharing my screen because I cannot get to the questions. Okay, sorry about this now. Okay, I can't get to my controls. So I'm going to ask somebody in the background if you can put the questions in. Team, if you can pop them into Slack, and I will answer them there. Sorry about this. Okay. How do you replace water cooler moments on hybrid or remote work? So I would say seek out as many opportunities as you possibly can to replicate hybrid and water cooler moments. This takes more thought. And I've seen where companies have experimented with kind of online networking. It has mixed approaches, and I think you've got to create something that's really meaningful and useful for people. So one, I would say, is take the time to spend time with your team and building the culture and development of that team. So for example, one of the things that we have done in the past as a team is we did this kind of hybrid hackathon, AI hackathon, where we took all of the tools and the learnings that we've made in AI, we shared it, then we went off, we learned some stuff, like all separately, we came back on and we had great conversations around it. Another one would be, and that was actually over a whole morning. So not only did we get the opportunity to kind of create and innovate together and learn together, you know, it was also kind of good crack. We kind of switched off from all the work, and it was really nice to come together in that way. Another thing that I would say is an example that I got from an agency called The Ready in the US. They do what's called I think they call it the OS coffee, but it's basically where people get on randomly at a set time, not randomly, but you know, everyone's invited, but it's not mandatory. And everyone gets to put different topics on the board. Now, they're not work topics. They can be kind of work related, but they're not like project related or anything like that. And it can be anything from, you know, Tina Turner to like, you know, what's in the news or anything. And they spend 5 minutes discussing a particular topic. And then there is a facilitator, and the facilitator will say, okay, do we move on to the next topic? Do we keep going on this one? Are we interested enough? So think outside the box. What are those moments that you can create? And I'd also, when you look at that cadence planner back there on the slides, or in the workbook, when is it that, even as a remote team, so we are a wholly remote team, but we do have times when we come together in person, and it's very, very focused. We do some work in that. We do some relationship in that, you know, relationship building in that, and we do some strategic work in that. But we have this kind of intense session where we all get to see each other in the flesh, and we get to spend time together. That's so important for us. So while you may not have these incidental water cooler moments that you might have had in the past, think about the ways that you can create those in the future. Supporting people to build their network intentionally, and facilitating that as a leader or a business owner. We have another one. Sorry, let me see. How do you recommend people get buy-in from their team on new management strategies with teams that may have just had a more traditional meetings and strategies in the past? Great question. So when we're talking about buy-in, my greatest tool for buy-in is ask people. When they're part of the design, there is no buy-in. It was everyone's suggestion. Ensuring that voices are heard. It doesn't mean that we move to consensus, that everybody has a say, and we change the decision based on what they're saying. But it means that everybody has a voice. Everybody has the opportunity to speak, and that is taken, adopted as seen as helpful. Like when it's the right thing to do, adopt it, and then roll something out. Because when somebody's inputting into this design, it has a big impact on this idea of rolling something out. Like, we're also a big fan of creating these very inclusive strategic views. Bring people into the conversations. You have not hired a bunch of preschoolers. Sometimes we kind of think that we have. You've hired really clever, bright people, and they are very often a lot closer to your customer or client potentially than you are. So just being really aware of that and getting their input as much as possible the whole time. If you're in a very large organization, create work groups, very focused work groups with clear parameters around their role and purpose, and input into it, because that way the rollout is a lot less, and it is more something that we have all agreed, and now we're implementing it, if that makes sense. This is a good question. What's the ideal ratio for in-office versus remote work? And how do I go about finding it for my organization? Well, I don't want to say, but sure, you should buy the workbook. I don't agree that there is an ideal. Obviously, some roles are more lend themselves better to remote work. and some roles require somebody to be there in person. You know, if you're picking and packing in a factory, you've got to be there to pick and pack. So you've got to look at what's right for your organization. What are the roles within your organization? What is their interaction with customers, with other teams? What can we create online? What can we not create online? And then designing it from there. But you very much have to do a deep dive into how do we work? What are the requirements? When do we need to be in the office? When do we not? And what are the needs and the wants? Because this other thing about the hybrid paradox is, you know, yes, we all might love working online and no commute and all the rest. But actually, lots of people really miss a lot of the parts of being in the office. So being really conscious and aware of that. There's also people, maybe very early stage career, who really need the learning of people around them. So how do we look at and address those needs? First, we have to find out what they are. Find out what they are, and then we can design around them. So I hope that helps. We're at the very top of the hour. I don't know if we've got any other questions yet there. And unfortunately, I can't even see the chat. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happened. Technology is fantastic when it's working. But what I would say is feel free to email us at any time at help@abetterwork.com. Go have a look at the workbook. I'm very, very excited to finally have it in my hand. So much work went into this, and so much, you know, of the learnings that I've had in the last 15 years, but also working with clients over the last 6 years, and especially what's happened in the last 3. So, you know, I would say take a look at this for sure. And then also follow along at abetterwork.com/make work better for our weekly twerk, where you will get a free weekly tweak direct to your inbox that you can experiment with and try to build a better place for everyone to work. So on that, thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, we'll see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.